So there I was, standing in my driveway at 7:43 a.m. on a Tuesday, holding my travel mug of coffee in one hand and a bright orange violation notice in the other, wondering at what exact point my life had become a sitcom written by someone who'd given up on subtlety. The notice was still warm, like literally warm from the printer. Karen Pemberton, HOA President, self-appointed defender of property values, and the human embodiment of a passive-aggressive sticky note, had apparently been up since dawn, printing out violations and taping them to doors like some kind of suburban Santa Claus, except instead of presents, she delivers crippling anxiety and $500 fines. The violation? My compost bins. My 3 modest, completely reasonable compost bins that I'd tucked away in the corner of my backyard like a responsible adult who occasionally watches documentaries about climate change and feels guilty about throwing away banana peels. Unsightly waste receptacles visible from neighboring properties, creating aesthetic disturbance and potential pest attraction. I read it 3 times. Then I read it again. Each time it made less sense. These weren't garbage bins overflowing with diapers and mystery liquids. They were compost bins for vegetable scraps. I was literally trying to be a better person, and apparently that was a violation of Oakwood Estates Community Standards, Section 7, subsection 4.2, paragraph B. Yes, she cited the paragraph. I looked up at the sky. Really? I said to God, the universe, waiter, or whoever was in charge of making sure my existence remained perpetually ridiculous. This is where we are now? The sky offered no comment. Just a beautiful sunrise and a bird chirping cheerfully, completely unaware that we lived in a fascist regime disguised as a planned community. I should probably back up and explain how I got here, and more importantly, how I ended up becoming the guy in the neighborhood with 3 giant Easter eggs in his backyard that have become more famous than I ever wanted to be. My name is Logan Matthews. I'm 34 years old. I'm an IT project manager, which means I spend my days translating between people who speak code and people who speak corporate jargon, and somehow both groups think I'm the problem. I bought my house in Oakwood Estates 2 years ago because it was affordable, had a decent backyard, and the HOA seemed manageable. That last part was a lie. A beautiful, seductive lie told to me by my real estate agent, who probably laughed all the way to the bank while I signed documents that essentially gave a neighborhood committee the power to dictate whether my mailbox could be black or approved black. Yes, there's a difference. No, I don't understand it either. The HOA was not manageable. The HOA was run by Karen Pemberton, a woman who had somehow turned neighborhood volunteer position into full-time authoritarian dictatorship with business cards. She had binoculars, expensive ones, the kind birdwatchers use. She had a clipboard that she carried everywhere, even to the mailbox. She had a laminated copy of the HOA bylaws that she carried around like some people carry photos of their grandchildren. So, except she actually showed it to people unprompted. I'd had minor run-ins with her before. My grass was once a 1/4 inch too long, according to her measuring tape. Yes, she has a measuring tape. And I got a violation notice. My garbage bins were visible from the street for approximately 45 minutes past the pickup deadline because I was stuck in a meeting and couldn't get home in time. Violation notice. I hung a Christmas wreath on my door in November, apparently 2 weeks before the official holiday decoration period began on November 15th at precisely 12:01 a.m. Guess what? Violation notice, hand-delivered, with a helpful calendar highlighting the acceptable decoration dates. But this was different. This was personal. Because Karen Pemberton lived 2 houses down from me, and her backyard had a direct sightline to mine. Which meant she was specifically, deliberately targeting my compost bins, which were bothering literally no one except her, and possibly the concept of her own happiness, if she even understood what happiness was. I'd seen her out there with those binoculars. I'd watched her from my kitchen window, standing on her back deck at 7 in the morning, scanning the neighborhood like a submarine captain searching for enemy vessels. The first time I saw it, I thought maybe she was bird watching. Then I realized she was writing things down. She had a notebook. She was documenting violations in real time like some kind of HOA surveillance operative. The woman needed a hobby. Or therapy. possibly both. I spent that entire Tuesday at work completely unable to focus. My coworker Ashley asked me 3 times if I was okay because I kept staring at my computer screen with what she described as the expression of a man planning something either brilliant or incredibly stupid. She wasn't wrong. By lunch, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to fight this violation through normal channels, attending meetings, filing appeals, playing by the rules that Karen had literally written. No, I was going to comply. I was going to comply so hard, so enthusiastically, so creatively, that Karen would regret ever looking at my backyard with those stupid binoculars. I called my buddy Marcus that night. Marcus is a welder and custom fabricator who builds ridiculous things for a living. Architectural installations, art pieces, one time a 12-foot metal octopus for a seafood restaurant that became a local landmark. If anyone could help me navigate this situation, it was him. Plus, he owed me a favor from when I helped him debug his website, which had somehow started redirecting to a Korean pop star's fan page. "Marcus," I said when he picked up, "I need your professional opinion on something." "Is this about Karen again?" Marcus has heard all my HOA stories. He thinks they're hilarious because he lives in a normal neighborhood where people just wave at each other and occasionally borrow lawnmowers like civilized humans, instead of measuring each other's grass height and reporting violations. "How did you know?" "Dude, it's always about Karen. What'd she get you for this time? Mailbox too shiny, doormat too welcoming?" "Compost bins." There was a pause. "Your compost bins? Tch, the ones you literally built from plans on the internet to be eco-friendly and responsible? The ones you researched for like 3 weeks before building?" "Those exact ones." "What possible reason?" "Unsightly waste receptacles, aesthetic disturbance, potential pest attraction." Marcus started laughing, that deep belly laugh that meant he thought something was genuinely absurd. "Pest attraction? Bro, you're composting vegetables, not running a raccoon sanctuary. You don't even put meat or dairy in there. What pests? Aggressive tomato hornworms?" "I know. The only pest problem I have is a 5'2" HOA president with surveillance equipment." "So what are you gonna do? Fight it?" I've been thinking about this all day, turning it over in my mind during every boring meeting and email chain. "I'm going to comply with her demands." "Really?" "That's not like you. You fought her on the garbage bin thing for 3 months." "Oh, I'm going to comply so hard she's going to regret ever filing that violation notice. I'm going to comply so enthusiastically that she'll wish she'd never even looked at my backyard." Another pause. I could hear the gears turning in Marcus's head. "I'm listening." "How hard would it be to turn my compost bins into giant Easter eggs?" The line went silent for so long I thought the call had dropped. "Marcus?" "I'm here. I'm just processing." "Did you say Easter eggs?" "Giant Easter eggs. Like 5 feet tall, shaped like eggs, painted in the most aggressively cheerful pastel colors known to mankind. The kind of colors that make people think of kindergarten classrooms and Easter baskets and happiness." "Why Easter eggs?" "Because Karen's complaint said they were unsightly. It didn't say anything about shape, color, or artistic expression. If I make them beautiful, whimsical yard art, she can't complain. They won't be waste receptacles anymore. They'll be decorative outdoor installations." I could practically hear Marcus grinning through the phone. "You're going to turn your compost bins into art." "Exactly. And you know what the HOA bylaws say about outdoor art?" "I'm going to guess they encourage it." Section 12, subsection 3. Homeowners are encouraged to enhance their properties with tasteful decorative elements that contribute to the overall aesthetic appeal of the community. Direct quote. I checked. "So if you make them decorative enough..." "She can't touch them. They're not violations, they're community enhancements." Marcus was fully laughing now. "Logan, this is either the dumbest or most genius thing you've ever thought of, and I genuinely can't tell which." "Can you do it?" "Can I do it? Bro, I can make you Easter eggs that'll be visible from space. I can make them so beautiful that people will drive from other neighborhoods just to look at them. When do you need them? I have 2 weeks to remedy the situation, or I get fined $500. So we install them on day 13. Give her 1 day to freak out before the deadline. Exactly. Maximum psychological impact. I'm in. 100% in. This is going to be beautiful. Can I add glitter? Marcus, if you don't add glitter, I'm going to be disappointed. This is why we're friends. I'll draw up some sketches and send them over tomorrow. The next 2 weeks were a blur of planning, design modifications, material sourcing, and trying not to laugh every time I thought about Karen's face when she saw what I was doing. Marcus and I met 3 times to go over the specifications. He showed me sketches that looked like they belonged in an art gallery. We discussed paint colors with the seriousness of people planning a military operation. At one point, his wife walked in on us, debating whether robin's egg blue or sky blue would be more aggressively whimsical, and just slowly backed out of the room shaking her head and muttering something about too much time on your hands. We decided on 3 distinct designs, each one more deliberately cheerful than the last. Egg 1, cotton candy pink with silver glitter accents. Yes, glitter. Outdoor-rated, weather-resistant glitter that would sparkle in the sunlight like a disco ball made of pure spite and environmental responsibility. Egg 2, sunshine yellow with white polka dots. Each dot perfectly sized and spaced because if we were going to do this, we were going to do it right. The dots would be exactly 3 inches in diameter, arranged in a mathematically pleasing pattern that Marcus worked out on graph paper. Egg 3, robin's egg blue. We went with robin's egg because it sounded more whimsical in my head, with hand-painted flowers. Daisies, tulips, roses. Marcus's wife actually agreed to paint these because she said, and I quote, "If you're going to be petty, at least be artistically petty." Each egg would be 5 feet tall, constructed from shaped metal panels with proper ventilation for composting, because they still needed to function, and mounted on decorative bases that Marcus designed to look like little gardens. They would be beautiful. They would be whimsical. They would be absolutely, utterly impossible to classify as unsightly. But the real genius, the part I was most proud of, came to me at 3 in the morning about a week before installation, when I couldn't sleep because I was too excited about decorative compost bins, which is probably a sign that I need to reevaluate my life choices, but whatever. I would dedicate them to Karen. Not in a ha-ha, look at this way. In a completely sincere, impossible to dispute, looks totally genuine way. I would paint her name on them in beautiful script. I would add a dedication plaque. I would make it look like I'd created this artistic installation specifically to honor her contribution to the neighborhood, her vision, her leadership. She couldn't complain about her own name being used to honor her without looking like a complete lunatic. It was perfect. It was diabolical. It was the most passive-aggressive thing I'd ever conceived, and I worked in IT where passive aggression was basically a job requirement. I called Marcus at 3:15 in the morning. "This better be good," he answered, voice heavy with sleep. "I want to put Karen's name on the eggs." Silence. "Marcus? I'm awake now, I'm listening. Explain." "Dedication plaques, inscriptions, Karen's Garden of Dreams. Planted with love by Karen, that kind of thing. Make it look like I created this whole installation to honor her." I heard movement, probably Marcus sitting up in bed. That's evil. That's brilliant and evil. She can't complain about her own name." Exactly. If she tries to file another violation about her own dedication, she looks insane. If she demands I remove it, she looks ungrateful. She's trapped. "Logan, have I ever told you that you have a devious mind?" "You have, but feel free to say it again." "You have a devious mind, and I'm honored to be part of this project. I'll add the inscriptions to the design. This is going to be legendary." Day 13 arrived. Marcus showed up with his truck at 6 a.m., which was earlier than I'd ever voluntarily been awake on a weekend, but this was important. We'd deliberately chosen a Saturday because Karen had her standing coffee date with the other HOA board members every Saturday morning from 7 to 9. Some kind of community planning breakfast That was probably just 2 hours of them comparing notes on neighborhood violations and discussing whose rose bushes were getting out of hand. She'd be gone. We'd have time to install everything before she got back. Unloading the eggs was an experience. Each one weighed about 80 pounds, and despite the hand trucks and equipment Marcus brought, it was still a workout. My neighbor Steve came out in his bathrobe, holding a cup of coffee, and just stared at us, struggling to maneuver a giant pink glitter egg through my back gate. "Logan," he said slowly, his voice full of wonder and confusion. "What are those?" "Compost bins." "Those are not compost bins." "They are compost bins shaped like Easter eggs." "Why?" "Because Karen said my old ones were unsightly." Steve's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, realization, disbelief, and finally, pure joy. His whole face lit up like someone had just told him he won the lottery. "You're doing this because of Karen." "I'm doing this in compliance with HOA regulations, Steve. Section 12, subsection 3 clearly encourages decorative outdoor installations. You're doing this to mess with Karen." "Steve, I would never. This is the greatest thing I've ever seen. Do you need help? Please tell me you need help. I want to be part of this." Between the three of us, we got all 3 eggs installed in about 90 minutes. They looked incredible. Absolutely ridiculous, but incredible. The morning sun hit the glitter on the pink egg, and it literally sparkled like something out of a fairy tale, written by someone on powerful medication. The polka dots on the yellow egg were perfectly placed, creating this hypnotic pattern that drew your eye. And the flowers on the blue egg were genuinely beautiful. Marcus's wife had outdone herself. Then came the finishing touches, the part I'd been most excited about. Using stencils Marcus had cut and exterior paint specifically designed for metal surfaces, I carefully added the inscriptions to each egg. My hands were shaking slightly, partly from excitement and partly from 3 cups of coffee on an empty stomach. On the pink egg, Karen's Garden of Dreams. On the yellow egg, Planted with Love by Karen. On the blue egg, Karen's Eco Paradise. The lettering was beautiful. Swirling, elegant script that looked like it belonged on a wedding invitation or a high-end bakery sign. Nothing about it suggested sarcasm or mockery. It looked completely, utterly sincere. Like I'd spent hours agonizing over the perfect way to honor my beloved HOA president. Finally, I installed the plaque at the base. Bronze-colored metal, professionally engraved by a local trophy shop who'd asked 0 questions when I gave them the text. Dedicated to Karen Pemberton, whose vision and dedication to neighborhood beautification inspired this artistic composting installation. Issue. May these gardens forever bloom in tribute to her commitment to environmental excellence and community standards. The trophy shop guy had smiled when he handed it to me. "HOA dispute?" he'd asked. "Is it that obvious?" "I've engraved a lot of passive-aggressive plaques. This is in the top 3. Good luck." Marcus stepped back and whistled, hands on his hips, surveying our work like an artist admiring a finished masterpiece. "Dude, this is art. This is genuine, legitimate art." Steve was taking pictures from every angle. "I'm sending these to everyone. My wife is going to die. The guys at work won't believe this. This is going in the neighborhood Facebook group." "Gentlemen," I said, surveying our work with a satisfaction I hadn't felt since successfully implementing a major software upgrade with 0 downtime. "I believe we have achieved full compliance with HOA regulations." We cleaned up and cleared out by 8:15. Karen would be home any minute, and I wanted to be safely inside my house with a clear view of her backyard when she discovered what I'd done. I positioned myself at my back window with fresh coffee and a bagel, like I was settling in to watch the season finale of my favorite show, which, in a way, I was. Karen's car pulled into her driveway at 8:47 a.m. I know because I was watching the clock, wondering if this was how supervillains felt when their elaborate plans were about to come to fruition. I watched her get out, purse over her shoulder, travel mug in hand, probably mentally composing her next violation notice for someone whose mailbox was 2 degrees off center or whatever insane thing she'd decided to focus on next. She walked toward her back door, head down, checking her phone. Then she looked up. Then she stopped. I swear I could see the exact moment her brain processed what she was looking at. She froze mid-step, 1 foot in the air like a cartoon character, staring at my backyard with an expression that can only be described as buffering. Then she moved closer to her fence, walking slowly like she was approaching something that might be dangerous or imaginary. Then she grabbed her binoculars from their permanent position on her deck table. Then she screamed. It wasn't a normal scream. It was the kind of scream that suggests someone just discovered their car was filled with bees, or they opened their front door to find a mariachi band, or they looked in their backyard and saw 3 5-foot-tall pastel Easter eggs with their name painted on them in elegant script. It was a scream of pure, unfiltered existential crisis. I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered the $500 fine hanging over my head for the crime of composting vegetables. And the feeling passed. Karen was on her phone within seconds, pacing in her backyard, gesturing wildly at my eggs. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I could imagine. There are eggs, giant eggs, with my name on them. This is a violation. This is harassment. This is, I don't even know what this is. Within 30 minutes, 3 other HOA board members showed up. I recognized them from the neighborhood directory. Bill Henderson, a retired accountant who always looked perpetually tired and vaguely disappointed in humanity. Sandra Wu, a lawyer who always seemed like she'd rather be literally anywhere else than at HOA meetings, and Doug Martinez, who I was pretty sure only joined the board because his wife made him, and he'd given up arguing about anything years ago. They all stood in Karen's backyard, staring at my creation like museum-goers contemplating a controversial art installation. Bill was trying not to smile. I could see his lips twitching. Sandra had her hand over her mouth, shoulders shaking in what was definitely suppressed laughter. Doug looked like he was watching the most entertaining thing he'd seen all year, maybe all decade. Karen was still gesturing wildly, probably explaining all the ways this was unacceptable, how it violated some obscure bylaw, how I was clearly mocking her, how this couldn't possibly be allowed. I watched Bill pull out his phone and presumably look up the bylaws. He scrolled for a while, zoomed in, scrolled more. He showed something to Sandra, who read it and nodded. He showed it to Doug, who just shrugged in a "what are you gonna do" kind of way. I watched Sandra walk closer to the fence to read the dedication plaque, her phone out, probably taking pictures. I watched her read it twice, then turn to Karen and say something that made Karen's face turn an impressive shade of red. This went on for about 20 minutes. Karen talking, gesturing, probably citing bylaws from memory. The board members listening, looking at my eggs, checking their phones. Tobuen. Occasionally glancing at each other with expressions that clearly said, "What the hell are we supposed to do about this?" Then they all went inside Karen's house, presumably for an emergency HOA session in her living room. My phone buzzed. Text from Steve. "Dude, Karen just called an emergency board meeting at her house. I can see them through her window. She's standing at her dining room table with what looks like a printout of the bylaws. She's pointing at it aggressively. Bill looks like he's trying not to laugh. This is the best Saturday ever. Thank you for existing," I replied. "I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm just a simple man who created beautiful yard art to honor our dedicated HOA president, Steve. You're a genius and a madman, and I'm so glad I live next to you. Duh. My wife wants to know if you can make us a giant flamingo for our garden." The emergency meeting lasted an hour and 15 minutes. When the board members finally left, Bill patted Karen on the shoulder in what looked like a consoling gesture. Sandra gave her what appeared to be a sympathetic smile, but could have been suppressed laughter. Doug gave Karen a thumbs up, which seemed deeply inappropriate given the context, but also hilarious. My phone rang about 10 minutes later. "Unknown number," I answered. "Mr. Matthews, this is Bill Henderson from the HOA board." I tried to sound innocent and helpful. "Hi, Bill. How can I help you?" "I'm calling about your installation in your backyard." "The Easter eggs? Aren't they beautiful? I really wanted to do something special for the neighborhood. Something that showed my commitment to both environmental responsibility and aesthetic enhancement." There was a pause. I could hear Bill struggling to maintain his professional HOA board member voice. "Yes, about that. We've reviewed the bylaws very carefully, and while the installation is certainly eye-catching, it does appear to meet all current regulations regarding outdoor art and decorative structures." "That's wonderful. I worked really hard to make sure everything was compliant. I actually read Section 12, Subsection 3 about 7 times to make sure I understood it correctly." "The dedication to Mrs. Pemberton that's a nice touch." "Well, she inspired me. Her dedication to our community is truly remarkable. Without her attention to detail and her commitment to maintaining standards, I never would have thought to create something so beautiful. In a way, these eggs are as much hers as they are mine." I could hear Bill struggling not to laugh. "Right, yes, very thoughtful. Anyway, I wanted to officially confirm that you're not in violation of any current bylaws. The eggs are within size restrictions for decorative installations. They're not commercial signage. They're clearly artistic in nature, and we do encourage decorative outdoor art. So, congratulations on your new composting system." "Thank you, Bill. I really appreciate you calling and confirming that. I was worried Mrs. Pemberton might not like them, but I hope she understands that they come from a place of genuine admiration for her work." "I'm sure she'll process that. Have a good day, Mr. Matthews." After we hung up, I may have done a small victory dance in my kitchen. Nothing too elaborate, just a little shimmy and a fist pump. Even my cat looked at me like I'd lost my mind. But she judges me for everything, so that was normal. But the story doesn't end there. Oh no. Because what I didn't anticipate, what I couldn't have possibly anticipated in my wildest, most optimistic dreams, was that people would actually, genuinely like the eggs. The first sign was Mrs. Chen from across the street. She knocked on my door that afternoon with a plate of homemade cookies that smelled like heaven. "Logan," she said, smiling warmly, "I love your Easter eggs. They're so cheerful. They make me smile every time I look out my back window. Would you be willing to make something similar for my herb garden? I'd pay you, of course." I blinked. This wasn't in the plan. "You sure, like them?" "They're wonderful. So much personality. The neighborhood needs more fun installations like this. Everything is usually so serious and beige. Your eggs are joyful." Over the next few days, more neighbors stopped by. The Morrison family, parents and 3 kids under 8, asked if they could take pictures with the eggs. "Our kids love them," Mrs. Morrison said, while her youngest daughter stared at the pink glitter egg like it was the most magical thing she'd ever seen. "They want to come back at Easter for a proper photo shoot. Would that be okay?" "Of course," I said, because what else was I going to say? "The eggs are for everyone to enjoy." The kids took about 50 pictures, posing with each egg, hugging them, pretending to hatch from them. It was actually kind of adorable. And I started to think maybe I'd accidentally created something good in addition to something petty. Then the local newspaper called. "Mr. Matthews, this is Jessica Chen from the Oakwood Observer. We heard about your Easter egg composting installation, and we'd love to do a feature on it for our community spotlight section." My brain short-circuited. "A feature?" "Yes. It's so rare to see creative environmental initiatives combined with public art, and the dedication to your neighbor is such a sweet story. It really embodies community spirit. When would you be available for an interview and photo session?" The article ran the following week, front page of the local section, complete with a full-color photo of me standing next to the eggs, smiling like I hadn't created them purely to irritate my HOA president. The headline read, "Local resident turns composting into Easter installation, dedicates it to neighbor." The article was glowing, like genuinely positive and sweet. It talked about environmental responsibility, community spirit, creative problem-solving, and how I'd transformed a mundane necessity into a whimsical celebration of sustainable living. It mentioned Karen by name at least 5 times, describing her as the inspiration behind this whimsical addition to the neighborhood, and a dedicated community leader whose commitment to excellence inspired a fellow resident to create something beautiful. Steve texted me a screenshot of the article. BRO, Karen's name is in the paper, attached to your compost eggs. She can't complain about this without looking like she hates joy and the environment. You've created a prison made of pastel metal, and her own name is on the bars. I'm framing this article and hanging it in my garage. The article got picked up by a local news blog, then shared on social media. People from other neighborhoods started driving by to see the eggs. Someone created an Instagram account, called it Oakwood Eggs, and posted photos from different angles and times of day. It got 2,000 followers in a week. I ran into Sandra from the HOA board at the grocery store a few days after the article came out. She saw me in the produce section and immediately started laughing. Logan, I have to tell you, that was the most brilliant thing I've ever seen in 15 years of HOA service. Karen tried to file a formal complaint about the eggs at our next meeting. She did? Oh yes, she printed out photos. Created a presentation, the whole thing. She said they were mocking her, that you were harassing her by putting her name on them without permission, that it was a violation of something. She got kind of incoherent. I tried not to smile. Failed completely. What did Bill say? He said, and I quote, Karen, the man dedicated a beautiful art installation to you and specifically thanked you for inspiring environmental excellence. How is that harassment? Are you against environmental excellence? Should we officially state that the HOA opposes environmental excellence? What did she say? Sandra was grinning now. She turned bright red, like genuinely concerning shade of red, and said it was clearly sarcastic. But she couldn't prove it. Everything about the installation looks completely sincere. The dedication plaque is beautiful and professionally made. The lettering is elegant. The eggs themselves are genuinely artistic. There's no indication of mockery anywhere. She's trapped, and she knows it. I just wanted to comply with the bylaws. Sandra laughed so hard she had to lean on her shopping cart. Sure you did. Anyway, half the board thinks it's hilarious, and the other half, well, Karen, is furious but powerless. Doug told me privately that it's the funniest thing he's seen in his entire tenure on the board, and he's been there for 8 years. So, on behalf of everyone who's ever gotten a ridiculous violation notice for a mailbox being 3 inches too far from the curb, thank you. The eggs became a legitimate thing in the neighborhood. People walked by specifically to look at them. Kids asked their parents about them. Tourists, actual tourists, stopped to take pictures. Someone left a bouquet of flowers at the base of one egg with a note that said, "Thank you for bringing joy to our community." The neighborhood Facebook group, which usually consisted of people arguing about parking and complaining about barking dogs, had a whole thread about creative landscaping that was obviously about my eggs, but pretended to be a general discussion. One comment read, "I think artistic installations add character to our community. We should encourage more creativity and individual expression." Another, "The Easter egg compost bins are delightful and show environmental responsibility. More neighbors should follow this example. Maybe we could have a neighborhood art contest." And my personal favorite, "Sarkant," posted by someone with obvious sarcasm skills. Isn't it wonderful when neighbors inspire each other to create beauty? We're so lucky to have dedicated community leaders like Mrs. Pemberton who motivate residents to think creatively about enhancing our neighborhood. Karen couldn't respond. What was she going to say? Actually, I hate them and wanted them removed. She'd look petty and anti-environment. They're mocking me? She'd look paranoid. I never gave permission for my name to be used? She'd look ungrateful and egotistical. She was completely, utterly stuck. Months passed. Fall arrived, then winter. I added seasonal decorations to the eggs, little scarves and hats in November. Tiny LED lights in December that made them glow softly at night like pastel beacons of spite. Each edition was tasteful, HOA compliant, and impossible to classify as a violation. The winter lights were particularly popular. People started bringing their kids by in the evenings to see the glowing eggs. Someone wrote a review on Google Maps. Yes, the eggs got Google Maps reviews that said, "Best free Christmas lights in the area, whimsical and heartwarming." Karen stopped using her binoculars where I could see her, or at least she stopped doing it, obviously. She never spoke to me. Not once. Not even a nod of acknowledgement. When we passed on the street, she'd look straight ahead, jaw tight, probably imagining creative ways to destroy my eggs without witnesses, or working out elaborate revenge schemes that she'd never implement because anything she did would make her look worse. But here's the thing that made it all worthwhile. My compost actually worked great. The eggs were functional. My garden thrived like never before. I had the best tomatoes in the neighborhood that summer, along with peppers, zucchini, and herbs that grew like they were in a time-lapse video. Mrs. Chen used my compost in her herb garden and brought me fresh basil as a thank you, which I used to make pesto that I shared with Steve, creating a whole circular economy of composting goodness. The eggs became a weird point of neighborhood pride. When people gave directions to our street, they'd say, "Turn left at the house with the giant Easter eggs." New residents would ask about them during neighborhood tours. The story would get told and retold, each version getting slightly more elaborate and divorced from reality. I heard one version where I was an environmental artist who'd moved here specifically to bring awareness to sustainable living practices through whimsical public art. Another version claimed the eggs were a tribute to Karen's late mother who loved Easter and environmental conservation, which was entirely invented but actually kind of sweet. One kid told me his mom said I was the Easter Bunny's house, which I didn't correct because it was adorable. I never corrected anyone. The mythology grew on its own, taking on a life beyond my original petty intentions. One evening, about 8 months after the installation, I was sitting on my back porch with a beer, looking at the eggs in the fading sunlight. They were ridiculous. Absolutely absurd. 3 giant, pastel-colored Easter eggs with Karen's name painted on them in elegant script. Sitting in my backyard like some kind of fever dream that had somehow manifested in reality. And I was proud of them. Not just because they'd let me win against Karen, though that was certainly satisfying. Not just because they'd become a neighborhood landmark, though that was pretty funny. Not even because my garden had never been better, though that was genuinely useful. I was proud because I'd taken Karen's attempt to control and diminish me, and I'd turned it into something creative, something that made people smile, something that followed every single rule while completely undermining the spirit of those rules in the most spectacular way possible. I'd won by being so aggressively compliant that my compliance itself became an act of rebellion. Steve wandered over with his own beer, settling into the chair next to me. Still love the eggs? More every day? Karen's been quieter lately. Fewer violation notices going out in general. Mrs. Morrison said she hasn't gotten one in 3 months, and she used to get them constantly for her kids leaving toys in the yard. Maybe she learned something, Steve snorted. Or maybe she's just plotting something bigger, the long game. Let her plot. I've got giant Easter eggs with her name on them. What's she gonna do? File a violation against her own dedication? Steve clinked his beer bottle against mine. You know what I love most about this whole thing? What? Your property value actually went up. My real estate agent friend told me. People specifically ask about the Easter egg house when they're looking in this neighborhood. You didn't just beat Karen. You proved her entire philosophy wrong. I hadn't thought about it that way, but he was right. Karen's whole thing was that conformity and strict rule-following protected property values. But my ridiculous rule-following in the most absurd way possible eggs had made my house more desirable, not less. I'd increased my property value through creative compliance and environmental responsibility. Huh, I said. So I'm actually helping the neighborhood more than she is. You're a hero, Logan. A weird, petty, brilliant hero who probably needs therapy, but is instead channeling all his issues into decorative composting. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. We sat there in comfortable silence, drinking our beers, watching the eggs catch the last rays of sunlight. The pink one glittered. The yellow one glowed warmly. The blue one looked almost serene with its painted flowers. They were beautiful. They were ridiculous. They were everything I'd hoped they'd be and more. That night I lay in bed thinking about the whole saga. From that first violation notice to the newspaper article to the neighborhood kids asking to take pictures to people driving from other zip codes just to see my stupid eggs. It had been 8 months of absolute suburban chaos, and I'd loved every minute of it. Was I being petty? Absolutely. Was I being vindictive? Probably. Was I being immature? Almost certainly. But was I also following every single rule, creating functional composting solutions, beautifying the neighborhood, making people smile, improving my garden, and increasing my property value? Also yes. And that's the beautiful thing about creative compliance. You can be petty and productive simultaneously. You can get revenge while making the world slightly better. You can turn someone's attempt to control you into an opportunity to express yourself and create something that brings joy to others, even if your original motivation was pure spite. The eggs weren't just compost bins. They were a statement. They were proof that rules are only as good as the spirit behind them, and when the spirit is control and pettiness, sometimes the best response is to out-petty the petty, while simultaneously being more productive and community-minded than the people trying to control you. Would I do it again? In a heartbeat. Would I recommend others do the same? Absolutely not. This required a very specific combination of skills, resources, connections, and a level of commitment to being petty that most people probably shouldn't aspire to. But for me, in that moment, with those eggs, it was perfect. I fell asleep smiling, knowing that somewhere 2 houses down, Karen Pemberton was probably staring at her ceiling, thinking about my giant Easter eggs, and wondering how her simple violation notice, her attempt to control one small aspect of my property, had led to this situation where her name was permanently painted on 3 5-foot-tall pastel composting structures that had become neighborhood landmarks. And honestly, that thought was more satisfying than any amount of revenge could ever be. The eggs are still there, by the way. Over a year later now, they're still standing strong. The paint has held up beautifully. Marcus used marine-grade coating that could survive anything short of a nuclear blast. The compost is still composting. My garden is still thriving. The neighborhood kids still ask to take pictures, especially around Easter when the eggs become selfie destinations. And Karen? Karen is still the HOA president, still writing violation notices, though notably fewer than before, still patrolling the neighborhood with her binoculars, though I haven't caught her looking at my property in months. But she hasn't written me a single violation since the eggs went up. Not one. Not for my grass height, my garbage bin placement, my holiday decorations, or anything else. Radio silence from Karen Pemberton, which is honestly more unsettling than the violation notices ever were. And every single morning, when I walk outside with my coffee, I see those 3 ridiculous, beautiful, spite-fueled eggs with her name painted on them in elegant script, and I remember that sometimes, just sometimes, the best way to win is to follow the rules so enthusiastically, so creatively, so completely, that your compliance becomes an art form that your enemies can't even begin to fight against. I am not a smart man, but I am a man with 3 giant Easter egg compost bins that have become neighborhood landmarks, local tourist attractions, and symbols of creative environmental responsibility, all while bearing the name of the HOA president who tried to fine me for composting. And every day they stand there is another day I won. And honestly, that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything.